Hello everybody, I am Jarrett Ross, the Genie Vlogger, and welcome back to another Professional Genealogist Reacts. On today's video, I will be reacting to a Christmas DNA test reveals a hidden truth between sisters by DNAangels.org. Now this is a channel that I've started to see a lot in my recommendations lately, and I haven't watched any of the videos, but after seeing a bunch, I was like, maybe I should actually add these to my watch later list. So I did that and finally was getting around to figuring out what to react to today and looked at these and was like, you know what, let me try one of those. So we're trying it. So hopefully it's going to be good. I think this is a search angel organization, which a search angel organization means that it's people who volunteer their time to help adoptees or people with unknown ancestry or searching for biological family members, and they help them find them. So it's not always a genetic genealogy case. A lot of search angels will be only paper trail researchers. But being that this is DNA Angels, I'm guessing that it is specifically genetic genealogy, and we know that this video is going to be about that. So with that said, let's just jump into it.
Hey everybody, so my next case for you is one of a DNA surprise, and two sisters decided to take DNA tests for Christmas for fun. So welcome back to Climb Stories with Amy. So these two sisters had gotten together. They had been working on the family history for probably about 5 or 6 years at this point. And they said, why don't we just do an Ancestry DNA test just for fun, just see what their ethnicity is, and let it build to our family history. We're trying to build up this family line, this legacy, and give this to our kids and our grandkids for a gift. So they will never not know where they come from.
Very common story, I feel like, with these stories where, they were just kind of doing family tree stuff and decided, hey, let's do this for fun, and not thinking much about it. And of course, as we are going to expect, something crazy turns up.
So they ordered the Ancestry DNA test with one of those Christmas sales. It came in, they both spit in the tube together and had a glass of wine after. And then they just waited for those results. They were super excited as the times was clicking closer and closer to those results being ready. They're like, I wonder if grandma's side shows up. I wonder if we can see the German ancestry. I wonder how much German we are. And so that's what they were thinking about, all of these things. They were super excited. They get the results back. They get that email. They both sit there and call each other and were like, hey, get over here now. Get over here now. They're ready. They're ready. They're ready. One was ready, the other was not. So the one that was ready, she thought that everybody's was ready if hers was ready because they were sent in the exact same day. So they ended up going over there looking at the first sister's results. They're looking at everything. They're seeing all the DNA matches. They're like, oh, there's cousin so-and-so there. There's auntie there, whoever. They're looking at all the DNA matches and recognizing who they are and where they belong in their tree. And it was super exciting to see the ethnicity.
I think when there's genealogy obsessive people like myself who finally do a DNA test, there is a joy in getting those results back and seeing all the stuff that's matching up with everything you've researched. And it just kind of is like a confirmation of, oh my gosh, yes, I was correct that this was this or that was that. Or, especially when it's something that you think you solved a mystery, but you weren't sure. And then you do the DNA and it's like this guy who should be a relative because of what I found in the paper trail. Well, he's a DNA relative, and that shows that it was correct. And it's so cool to see that. But back to what she was saying about the DNA test not being ready at the same time. I feel like that's a pretty common thing that, people will send their DNA tests around the same time or multiple kits, and then, they'll come back staggered. And, they're probably getting a ton of DNA tests at once at each place. And so it just is not even really a matter of when did you mail it, but how does it kind of get sorted in with everything. And I'm sure a lot of stuff will get sorted to the front, and other stuff that came with the same load somehow gets sorted more towards the back, and then you get days, if not weeks, differences on when the results are ready.
About 4 days later, the second sister's email comes through. Oh my God, it's ready. It's ready. You guys have to come see this. Come look, come look. They get over there and they start looking. They were like, wait, where's our cousin? Where's our aunt? Where's everybody at? Why do I have them and you don't have them? You guys, it took them a whole week to realize what was going on. And it wasn't them two that figured it out. It was one of their daughters who looked at it closely because she was tired of listening to them bicker back and forth about it. She looked at it and it's like, oh. She just discovered that her mom was a DNA surprise and that they were not full sisters, they were half sisters. Mom had a affair, is what we're guessing, based on some of the family history from the family line that was still living.
So that's really funny, just because when you look at your DNA results, especially on Ancestry, the relationship estimation is one of the biggest things there. And if they're coming up as half siblings, if I remember correctly, a lot of times half siblings, the relationship projection will actually be like first cousins or aunt and uncle or some. It's not usually half sibling, although sometimes I think they might do half sibling along with a list of other possibilities. So with that, I would think that one of them would have been like, hey, why are we matching like this? Not as much of why are we matching different people and why is this other stuff off. But granted, sometimes you might just overlook the smallest little thing, so can be understandable. But that's got to be so crazy to find out that your sibling is not your full sibling.
They do suspect that there's an affair because about the time that this sister was conceived, Mom and Dad were having some marital issues, and they had actually split up briefly, very, very briefly. They had split up, and then they got back together, and then they had the great news that, surprise, we're pregnant, and went on about life. We don't know if she knew that the baby was somebody else's. We don't know if Dad knew that the baby was somebody else's. We have no idea about any of that. We're just lucky enough to have a little bit of information because the clients, they had no idea that their mom and dad had split until they had started asking those questions to the family members. So that's how they discovered they were half sisters. So our next task was to basically give them some help, some support, because she was really, really struggling with this. She felt like she was lied to. Her whole life was completely fabricated. She didn't know where she came from. She didn't know anything at this point. She was completely lost. So we sent her some information for a support group, and she was very, very thankful for that and utilized that.
Yeah, so when it comes to this type of a case, this is what we would call an unknown parentage. You'd often hear the term NPE thrown around, non-paternity event, or not parent expected. There's a lot of actually different variations of NPE, but it all basically just means the same thing of what you thought was your biological family is not truly your biological family. Now, being that they are matching as half-sisters, I think the assumption that they do have the same mom, you can probably assume that, and then I'm sure they were actually, seen being born. The mom remembers that. So I'm sure that kind of helps with that too. But if they were not 100% sure, maybe let's say, they figured this out after their parents had already passed away, one thing they could do is actually upload their DNA results to Family Tree DNA or to GEDmatch and look at their X chromosome comparison. So basically, when you have a set of sisters that are half sisters, the X chromosomes will vary depending on which parent is the shared parent. So if the shared parent actually turned out to be the father for some reason, then that would actually mean that the sisters would have a full match across their entire X chromosome. The reason for this is because the X chromosome that females inherit from their father is inherited completely unchanged from what the father had. Because the father only has one X chromosome, so that's all he has to give his daughters. So each one of them would get the same X chromosome from their father, and thus when they look at their DNA matching, they'll see a solid match across the X chromosome. If it's the mother that they share, then they will share DNA on their X chromosome, but it won't be one solid shared segment across the entire chromosome. It's going to be a bunch of scattered segments, because the DNA that they inherit from their mother for the X chromosome has been recombined. So basically that just means that the mother has two X chromosomes, because that's what makes them female. Females have two X's, males have an X chromosome and a Y chromosome. Well, with females, that X chromosome recombines, and then the children inherit that recombined X chromosome. So two half-sisters that share the same mother, when comparing their X chromosome, won't see a fully matching X chromosome. They'll just see a bunch of different segments. So that's one quick way to actually be able to tell, just utilizing DNA, assuming that they don't know family story and all of that. But I think with a lot of cases like this, it's almost always the dad that's going to be the one who is different and not really the mom. And I imagine they know that story with this case.
So while she's trying to get some of the help and connection with what's going on in her life to let her know that she's not alone, we were working the DNA matches. We were able to identify a most recent common ancestor, and we landed on the biological father line, and it took us probably about 8 or 9 days to get to the birth father line. And then another good full day of our research team, which are fantastic. Our research team is like on it with this case. They were able to find a few things that I couldn't even find, and that way I could give some pieces of the puzzle to our client of who she is, where she comes from, what part of half of her DNA, where that came from. So I tried to get as much information. We got some photographs. One of the research teams were actually able to find 2 of his living children so she can connect with them.
Okay, interesting. I wasn't sure if they had necessarily found the father, because she kept saying, father's line and all of that. So when it comes to genetic genealogy and solving these unknown parentage cases, you can sometimes narrow it down, but not know for sure. And sometimes you might be able to narrow it down of, okay, we're pretty sure that these people are your grandparents, but we don't know which one of their sons is your father. Sometimes they can't even get it that far down. Maybe they can only say, okay, we're pretty sure this couple is your great-grandparents, but we don't know how you descend. It sounds like if she's saying, 2 other children, that would indicate that 2 other children is in, we know who your father is, we've identified him, which based on what she said, I think 8, 9, 10 days to do that, that's pretty good. That to me, that probably says that it was a little bit of a difficult case, but that they found some very hard to find links between the DNA matches. And so, it took some time, but they got it. So, it takes a lot of learning and work to be able to do these cases. But it does sound like they were able to identify the biological father. So, all right, let's listen to the rest.
We found the obituary. We found a couple of write-ups for sports in the newspapers. And it was kind of funny that her son played the exact same position in football as her birth father did.
Oh, that's cool.
And they both had a love of chess. And they both went to the same college. So there's a couple little similarities between the 2 families, even though they weren't raised together. And she had no idea he was a perfect stranger. But she was able to identify them. She connected to the half-sisters. I don't have an update of how that went. She hasn't updated me yet. But that's it for today.
Okay, well, that was an interesting video. I was not expecting it to be a TikTok. I'll have to do a quick preview of any other videos I do a reaction to of theirs to see if they're TikToks. But I thought I did one at one point, because I have like a dozen in my list. But I thought I did one at one point. It wasn't a TikTok. But anyway, I do love the fact that it is a video talking about genealogy and actually what you can do with DNA testing. Granted, they didn't go into any specific details about, what was their best DNA match or what kind of population groups they were working with or anything. It was a very, very vague discussion, which I can definitely understand, especially if the clients were like, we're not comfortable with you sharing any details about us. And genealogists know how very small little details can be used by people to figure out a lot of other bigger details, because that's what we do every day, especially people that are in this line of work with the unknown parentage searches and finding living family and stuff. We know a lot of tricks with that. With that last part, in terms of talking about the similarities between the biological family and, her son and her, and that's something that I think comes up all the time in these cases. And it really does play into that nature versus nurture discussion where, I think both have a very important role. It's definitely not one over the other, but it's always amazing when you do these types of cases because you truly see how nature does have an impact on things that you wouldn't necessarily always expect. And sometimes it's cool stuff like that of her son having the same position in football as her biological father, going to the same school and having similar interests. It's, sometimes it's small stuff, sometimes it's bigger stuff, but either way, I think anytime people do that, it's always so cool. And you don't even have to be coming from an unknown parentage case or an adoption case to find that, because I feel like a lot of people that just build out their family trees and look into the stories of their ancestors and the relatives of theirs from the past, that they often will find these connections of oh my gosh, that's just like me, or that's what I would have done, or, I didn't know anyone else in the family had an interest in this, or, I don't know. I'd love to hear stories from people where they've had similar experiences of finding that nature connection with their newly found relatives or biological family or newly identified ancestors. And if you enjoyed this reaction and would like to see more just like it, be sure to check out this one of mine right here. Thank you to my Patreon patrons and YouTube members.